are listening to Stories from Palestine podcast, a podcast recorded in Palestine and about Palestine. My name is Crystal. I am originally from the Netherlands and I am married to a Palestinian. We live in Beit Safafa between Jerusalem and Bethlehem, and we run Singer Cafe and Al Jisr Bar in Beit Sahur. Before moving to Palestine in 2013, I worked as a teacher and tour guide in the Netherlands. I have a degree in history and in tour guiding and many years of tour guiding experience. Due to the COVID pandemic, tourism in Palestine came to a complete halt, and that's why I started Stories from Palestine podcast in August 2020. This is the second year of the podcast, with every week on Monday a new episode about the history and heritage of Palestine, as well as the reality of life today. I hope you will enjoy today's episode.
Last week, I heard somewhere that February is Black History Month. So I looked it up and I read that it is an annual celebration of achievements by the African Americans and a time for recognizing their central role in the U.S. history. On my long list of topics for podcast episodes, I had a planned episode about the Afro-Palestinian community in Jerusalem. I just hadn't scheduled the interview yet. But knowing that February is Black History Month, I immediately reached out to a friend of the Afro-Palestinian community to see if we could organize an interview on short notice. This friend's name is Issam Bayan, and he runs the Basem's Gallery Bookshop Cafe in the Via Dolorosa. And he suggested that I speak to Mohammed Kaus, a third-generation Afro-Palestinian with good English. We also tried to get a female voice on the podcast, but it seems that the active women in the community are very busy, and so they could not make an appointment at short notice. So we have to dedicate an episode to women in Palestine another time soon. Issam was so friendly to host us for the interview in his cafe, and I highly recommend that if you visit Jerusalem, you go check out his place. It's a small, cozy cafe with traditional Palestinian designs, books, and good coffee, and a wonderful, friendly owner. The day of the interview, it was raining a lot, and I was coming down through Damascus Gate into El Wad Street, and as a matter of habit, I looked to the right to the juice bar, where I used to meet with Ali Jadda. He is one of the icons of the Afro-Palestinian community. I hadn't seen him in 2 years. I heard he spent most of his time in Akka with his family there. And to my big surprise, I saw him. He was sitting right there as I was on my way to the interview with a third-generation Afro-Palestinian to speak about their community. So I walked up to Ali, and it was only when I took down my mask that he recognized me from the many tour groups that I used to take to him in the past for guided tours around the city. We chatted for a while, and then I realized that this was a fantastic opportunity to get his voice in the podcast episode. So I asked his permission, and I did a completely unprepared short interview with him. It was so unprepared and spontaneous that I didn't even ask him to elaborate on his prison time. So let me clarify that for those of you who have never heard of Ali Jadda. In 1968, after Israel occupied the West Bank, Gaza, Golan Heights, Sinai and East Jerusalem, Ali was a young man, 17 years old, part of a resistance movement called the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine. Him and his cousin Mahmoud took part in operations placing hand grenades in West Jerusalem that injured a number of Israelis. They spent 17 years in prison and were released during a prisoner exchange. After his release, Ali worked as a journalist and as an alternative tour guide, taking groups around the old city to show them the reality of life in occupied Jerusalem. And that is how I met Ali during my work with groups bringing them to Jerusalem when he was our tour guide. I'm so lucky this morning because I'm just about to go and have an interview about the Afro-Palestinian community in Jerusalem. when on my way to Muhammad Kaus, whom I'm going to meet, I bump into an old friend, Ali Jadda. And Ali used to always take us on tours around the city of Jerusalem. And I always, until today, when I teach my students about tour guiding, I give you as an example. And I tell them, Ali used to tell us 1 or 2 sentences only. But in the end of the tour, you'd remember everything he said. There was no bullshit, no details that we didn't need to know. And you would always give us the real life of Jerusalem. And Ali, recently you've been more and more in Akka, but you're here on a week, you said, just to visit family and friends. Can you just give us a little bit an idea of how is the difference for you to be in Akka and to be in Jerusalem?
First of all, my name is Ali Mohammed Jadda. I am an Afro Palestinian, 3rd generation. My father is from Chad. My mother is a 2nd generation. The father from Nigeria, my grandfather. My grandmother is a Palestinian Christian. So in some way, I'm cocktail.
Yeah.
Now, I am in the north, in Akko. I'm staying with my wife, my children. I have 3 daughters, 2 sons. I was obliged to go to Akko because I was in need of medical treatment. Recently, I got bloodshed in the stomach. So I go to Haifa, Rambam Hospital for medical treatment. Once they give me time to relax, I go to my wife and children and stay with them. Now, let me say it in simple words. What's the difference between the old city of Jerusalem and Akko, where the 2 cities is part of Palestine? But honestly, I usually say the best girlfriend I met in my life is the old city of Jerusalem. I can't find myself without being in the old city. You see, sometimes I walk alone, and I go in a dialogue with the stones. At the same time, I feel the old city is crying and saying to the whole world, please save me. I am suffering. I can't stand it anymore. And that because of the occupation. The various measures carried by the occupation against Jerusalem, the old city, and the policy creeping the settlers little by little in the old city. And when I am talking about settlers, I'm talking about the most disgusting, the most horrible among the Israelis. But as part of this picture that I'm putting in front of you, I'm optimistic concerning the future. I can see in the new generation the real future of the old city of Jerusalem. And this generation is the generation which will burn the ground under the feet of the occupiers.
Ali, can I ask you what's your age? Just to get a little bit of a perspective, or at least the year you were born in.
Yeah, I was born in 1950.
In the old city, did you grow up here?
Yeah. At the African Quarter. On the 13th of the recent months was my birthday.
Oh.
I celebrated that in Akko.
Oh, yeah.
With the family over there.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
What was it like to grow up in the African Quarter? Or can you describe it for people who have never been there?
Well, concerning the African Quarter, I say we are really privileged among Palestinians. We have a lot of respect. We are well accepted by the Palestinians. And that has to do with our national role. And it's well known that the African Quarter used to be always among the avant-garde in the national struggle against the Israeli occupation.
Wasn't the African Quarter a quarter that was used before in Ottoman time as a prison?
As a prison.
Yeah.
You see, I say all the time, I was in jail for 17 years, from 1968. I was released in a big exchange of prisoners in 1985. You see, now, the new generation that we have now, I'm talking about the fourth generation, girls and boys, I'm really very, very delighted. I'm very mabsoot in Arabic, we say, because they are very strong, very strong.
What would you say that growing up in Jerusalem in the Afro-Palestinian community made your life maybe different from people who are not with a black skin color? Did it make a difference, or?
I tell you honestly, what's good about the Palestinians that we have no problem concerning our skin. Today, if you go to the African quarter, you will see brothers married to Palestinian girls, and you will see sisters from the quarter married to Palestinian. So we have no problem now. And this, as I told you, it has to do with our role on the level of the national struggle.
When you go to the Afro-Palestinian quarter today, I went there a few weeks ago because I entered the Al-Aqsa compound. I had a special tansik with the Awqaf and we did a tour. But we sat there for a while waiting for them to pick us up. And there is all the time Israeli police present.
Yeah.
When you want to enter into the quarter, you always have to pass through this police presence.
Yeah. Look, close to the African quarter, it's regarded by the Israelis as a hot spot because whenever there are troubles, clashes inside the Aqsa Mosque, the first position which will be boiling is the African quarter. So for that, all the time you have checkpoints.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you still go there now? Like when you come from Akka, do you have your house still there?
Yeah. I have a house. My wife, my children over there. Okay. And I have a house here at the African quarter.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a daughter who is staying here. Yeah.
Did all your children manage to study after school? Go to university?
Yeah. One of them is studying at Al-Quds University, criminology, and I had one graduated in Akko as optica.
Yeah, for glasses. Yeah. And how is Mahmoud? Is he still alive?
Yeah. He's okay, Mahmoud. Yeah. He's okay. No, he's still taking tours also. Most of the time, students from various schools, he's taking them around. He's doing a good work.
Yeah, even though last 2 years everything was so slow with the corona, but it's coming back now. So how big do you think the Afro-Palestinian community is at the moment?
At the moment, we are talking about 30 families. But we have some of the brothers and sisters who are living outside the African quarter. No more space. Yeah.
I have one question, is about when you speak about a community, it means that you distinguish yourself somehow from others in the society. Are there particular things that are so special and different in the Afro-Palestinian community from other Palestinians, or is it just the name?
I think it's the name. If you are talking about my generation and the fourth generation, it's because just the name. While we are totally Palestinians, and even I say we are more Catholic than the Pope. We are more Palestinians than Palestinians.
Have you ever been to the African continent? Did you ever have a chance to travel?
No. Never. And I say usually if I will be in Africa, I will be as a stupid tourist.
Probably not blend in completely, yeah. But also...
I was in 1992 in Switzerland. I was making a tour in Europe, lecturing. So I was in Geneva. The friends over there said to me on the next day, Ali, we've had a session this evening and we said Ali has a lot of troubles with the Israelis, so we suggest. I said, yes, that you stay here, you have your apartment, don't worry about the money, everything is arranged. I said to them, you see all your Europe this? I said, yeah. I said to them, I am not ready to exchange with one of the corners of the old city, Jerusalem.
Yeah. Thank you, Ali, for taking a little bit of time.
You are welcome. You are welcome in any time.
I'm sitting here in a cafe in the old city of Jerusalem, and I'm here to talk to Mohammed about the Afro-Palestinian community, because this month is Black History Month, February. And I said, I have had this on my list for podcast recording since a long time, and this is the great month to do that. And I'm very happy that you have a little bit of time, because you're a busy man and you have lots of things to do. The Afro-Palestinian community has some really interesting people that we can discuss and talk about. And it's really nice to have somebody from a younger generation. Maybe before we start talking about the community, can you introduce yourself? Who are you? What do you do in life?
My name is Muhammad Qos. I am 22 years old, and I've lived in the community all my life. I work right now in a hotel in West Jerusalem, and yeah.
And how did you get to work in the hotel? Like, what's your background in studies and experience?
Well, I studied for 2.5 years in Switzerland in hotel management and in business management. I thought that the hospitality industry was a never-dying industry, but little did I know that once I graduated, COVID-19 hit.
Yeah.
So, yes, I began doing internships here in Jerusalem, while I had other dreams of going outside, but because of the entire situation, I couldn't leave the country. So I stayed here and started working with Israeli hotels, let's say, or the hotels in West Jerusalem.
Yeah.
Just for the plain reason that the hotels in East Jerusalem were not even open for work.
Yeah, I imagine. Do you see a difference now that the airport opened again?
No, not at all. There is a difference, yes. Now there's no more, let's say, tourism, how it was like before the entire COVID situation. Now we have only, let's say, interior tourism. So we have only the Israelis, heavy Israelis, who are very rude, let's say.
Yeah, we were just talking about that. Yes. Yeah, it's not the easiest customer to have. No, you're right.
Customer service, but it's manageable.
Yeah. Mohammed, can you tell me a little bit about your relation to the Afro-Palestinian community? What is your own descent? Like, do you know anything about your great-grandfathers? And in general, after that, about who are the Afro-Palestinians?
Well, the Afro-Palestinians in Jerusalem descend from 4 different countries in Africa, from Chad, Sudan, Senegal, and Nigeria. So I am the 3rd generation of Afro-Palestinians in Jerusalem. My grandfather is the one who came here alongside other people from Africa in 2 goals. One is to do pilgrimage in Al-Aqsa Mosque. And after that, when the Israelis came into Jerusalem in 1948, they decided to stay there in order to defend Jerusalem and Al-Aqsa Mosque from the Israelis. And they have remained here since that time, ever since that time. So we've been here for, I think, around 76, 77 years as Afro-Palestinians here in Jerusalem. And personally, I am from Chad.
Yeah, both your parents are from there?
Only my grandfather. My father was born here.
Yeah.
My mother was born in the States, actually, but she's also originally Palestinian from Ramallah.
So your grandfather came from Chad, and he married somebody from Chad?
No, he married a Palestinian woman from Jericho.
Ah.
He married her when he was in his 60s, I believe.
Oh.
Yes, and brought 5 children, including my father.
Yeah.
And I don't know my grandfather because he passed away before I was born.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah.
So that's interesting. How is do you have anything with Chad? Have you ever been there, or do you have any idea that in the future you would like to go and visit there? Do you have any connection to that country of your grandfather, or not at all?
I mean, I don't really have, like, let's say, connections there, but my father tells me that, nor my father has connections there, but my father used to always tell me that we have around 70, 80 cousins back in Chad that he doesn't know about. Like, he has brothers and sisters my father doesn't even know about, because, as you know, my grandfather has married my grandmother at 60, but he married 7 times. My grandmother was the 7th.
Oh!
So he has many children and many, let's say, grandchildren that my father doesn't know about. So I'm sure there is family there, but we just don't know how to reach them or how to get in touch with them.
Yeah. Do you know of any other Palestinians in the Afro-Palestinian community that do have connection to people back in Africa?
Not too much, maybe just a few, 1 or 2, because we're not allowed to move as freely. Like, it's not that easy to go to Africa nowadays, because we have to go through Egypt and through other places, and with the entire history of the African community society, we're not on best terms with so-called Israel. They do restrict our movement a little.
Yeah. You said that a large part of the community came here as pilgrims, and then they stayed here to defend Al-Aqsa, and they got married here. Were there other times in history where people came from Africa, or is that the...
They used to come before, but they used to go and come between Africa and Palestine. It was only since the Israeli occupation decided to take over Palestine, they decided to stay and defend Palestine with the Palestinians.
Yeah.
But they used to come by the times of Mansa Musa. I don't know if you ever heard about him. He used to be the wealthiest African king who used to go around and travel the world and just distribute gold. So people from Africa used to go and come with this king, and he would roam around the entire globe, let's say. And they would go and come, and they discover lands with him, and so far, so not. So It's been from back in those times.
Yeah. So I know there, and we'll talk about the neighborhood where you grew up and where you were born. But around Palestine, like Greater Palestine, are there other places where you have an Afro-Palestinian community?
Yes. We have Afro-Palestinian community in the refugee camps in Lebanon. We have in Amman as well, and a little bit in Saudi Arabia.
And you mentioned Jericho. I remember going to Jericho and seeing quite a lot of very, very dark-skinned people there. Is that the same story?
Yes, almost.
Do you have any family members that are in Jericho or in other parts?
Yes, we do. Like all my father's relatives, let's say, from his mother's side, are from Jericho, because, as I told you, my grandmother married a woman from Jericho.
Yeah.
So most of his cousins and whatnot are in Jericho, living in Jericho.
Yeah. Yeah, and here in Jerusalem, there is a quarter. We always hear about Jerusalem that there are 4 quarters, but actually there are a couple of other quarters that are not very often mentioned. There's also a quarter of the Domari Gypsies, and there are a few others that you can actually hear in a very nice podcast episode by the Jerusalem Unplugged podcast. And one of them is where you born and grew up. Can you say something about the history of that area where you grew up, the African Quarter? Because I read that this is formerly an Ottoman building that was used also as a prison before the British Mandate.
Yes, so before the Ottoman Empire fell in World War I, let's say, my quarter was a prison for the Ottoman Empire. So the prison was divided into 2 sections. Section which was named Ala ad-Din al-Busayri, and section which was named Habs al-Dam and Ala ad-Din al-Busayri. Anyways, the one that I live in is named Ala ad-Din al-Busayri. And this part was mainly for holding people with high sentences, like, let's say, 15 years, 20 years, and what's all not. The other side of the community was for executions. So they go... for people who need to be hanged, people who need to be executed, will be on the other side. Anybody in holding would be in my section. Anybody who will want to be executed will be in the other. You just cross the street and you they'll be executed.
I remember going there once with a tour guide, and he showed us, you go towards Al-Aqsa Mosque, and then you have a street. It's not a very wide street. And then you have a big gate on the right side and a big gate on the left side. And when you enter into that gate, it's like a small compound. You have a sort of a courtyard, and there are all these, it looks like small houses. But now I was almost about to say small cells. But actually that word, it fits very well with the reality of what it was.
And then even after the Ottoman Empire, after the Africans settled in Jerusalem, let's say, I'm going to be a little bit racist here, but the white population of Jerusalem started calling it Habs al-Abid, which means the cell of niggers.
Cell of niggers?
Yes.
Abid, can you explain that word?
Abid basically means niggers in Arabic. Well, not niggers, but it's what they try to mean.
Because abed, it means slave,
yes,
right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So they called it the prison of the slaves.
Basically, because it was a prison and we are African who are living in it.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's also interesting, maybe to shift to, how do you feel that as the Afro-Palestinian community, you are being perceived by the Palestinians in Jerusalem and by the Israelis that are now in Jerusalem?
Two different perspectives, actually. So the Israelis view us as any other Arab. You know, the Israelis view themselves as they are more important than the rest of the population on this planet, let's say. And the Arabs are, let's say, a little bit racist, not too much, but you still feel that racism nowadays as well. I mean, they may not show it to you, but you still kind of feel that little hinge of racism.
Yeah. But there is intermarriage between...
There is, yes.
Yeah.
Because now it's the 21st century. I mean, people have a little bit open minds, thank God.
Yeah.
So, yes, you know, black people from the community are marrying white women, black women from the community are marrying white guys. So there's, in a few more years, there will not be any more, let's say, black people in the community.
Do you still have a couple of people who mainly married within the community who are really very, very dark-skinned?
Yes. We have one man, his name is Adam Balalawi, who is he's from Chad or Sudan, I believe. I think Sudan. And he married a Palestinian woman from Bethlehem, but she is also very dark-skinned with African origins. So their kids are extremely dark. But yes,
yeah.
He's the only guy who's protecting the color in the community.
Yeah. If you speak about community, then it sounds like community, it means that you have things in common that are different from the rest of the society. So I'm very curious to know if there are typical things in your community that make you, except for the skin color, let's say, yeah, we have certain traditions or heritage or food or something that really distinguishes us from other Palestinians. Or is it only by name that you are a community?
No, we do have a few things to distinguish us from the rest of the other communities. We have a dish named aside, which is, I'm not sure how to explain the ingredients for you, but we gather around all together. It's very spicy. And it's they used to call it poor people food. I'm not sure who called it. I think my father. And we'd gather around on the entire community, big men, small, young folks, sit around the table and eat aside. This was like a tradition for the Africans, because when they used to go on their long journeys, they used to have to cook. So they'd cook this aside, sit around, eat it, and then continue on their journey. So we still used to do that back in the few times we've done it in my lifetime, but...
Is it like any dish that you can describe that is comparable to Arab dishes, or is it so different?
It is with smeed. I don't know what smeed is, but you put smeed and it becomes like very fluffy and it's very filling actually. And then you put some meat with tomato sauce and very extremely spicy substances around it. And you take a little bit of the meat and the tomato sauce, you dump it in this meat and you eat.
It's like a porridge.
It's a very heavy porridge.
Yeah, it's thinner than couscous. The smeat is...
Yes, but you make the smeat extremely heavy, so it becomes like baton. What is it?
Baton, like concrete.
Cement, like cement. It becomes basically like cement.
And still until today, some people will cook this dish.
Well, most people don't know how to cook it nowadays, but my uncle still knows how to cook it. But now everybody is busy nowadays. Everybody has work to do. Everybody has their family to take care of. And it's not as in contact with other people as it used to be back in the day. You know?
Yeah. Is there still, maybe in the older community, people who speak another language except for the Arabic?
I'm sure there used to be maybe in the first generation, but now, no. Everybody speaks Arabic.
Yeah.
And if you speak English, and other few speak other languages.
Yeah.
Very few.
Do you know how many people are we talking about in Jerusalem in this Afro-Palestinian community?
350.
That's how many families?
How many families? A good question. I think around 50 families. Yeah. Around that number, 50.
Do you know all of them? Would you you see someone in the street and you're immediately know that this is from my neighborhood?
Yeah. We have a very big number of personnel under this community.
Yeah.
But yes, and we're all together in connection, you know, let's say my family name is Goz and the other family name is Bulala, but we say we are cousins because, you know, we are from the same soil, our grandfathers came from the same place. So, me, I only have a sister. So, but I have 48 cousins.
Ah!
So,
lots of weddings.
Yes, exactly.
Do people stay in the old city in these two places that you described, the old prison, or are they also starting to move away from the old city?
No, but now, yes, they're starting to move away. But a few other people also moved away, but also lived in the old city. So you have a little bit of the community in Bab al-Hadid, a little bit in other parts of the old city as well. But mostly, yes, because the old city is a big challenge. It's not easy living in the old city as a Palestinian, Black, Arab, and Muslim, you know, all together.
Yeah.
So many people want to go somewhere with their lives, so they decide to live somewhere a bit more peaceful, a bit more easygoing than the old city.
Can you elaborate a little bit on that? How, as a kid growing up in Jerusalem, what type of experiences do you have when you say that it's hard? When
I was young, I used to remember, this was when I was extremely young, that there would be clashes with the police in the old city. And then the Israeli army would raid every single house in the old city. So that would, of course, make everybody afraid, you know, all the youngsters, even me especially. But growing up with that, you know, every day hearing problems, every day hearing clashes, you know, not doing anything, you know, just like this, coming into people's houses, just terrorizing them. It has developed me into a person, let's say, who kind of doesn't really care about any army in the world at this point of time. Because I've seen so much the monstrosities, you say, from the Israeli army that now I'm just heartless for situations like these. When there's bombs and screaming and shouting, I'm just meh, whatever.
It became a
routine.
Yeah, you normalized it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, not completely normalized it. I mean, now they cannot come into the community and do whatever they want. Me and my cousins will stand up to them. There's also a line that they should not cross with us.
Yeah.
You know, because it's been going on for so many years of our lives. It's okay, till when?
Yeah. For any listeners who are not really that much aware of what happens in the old city, can you describe when you're walking around and you have a police officer asking you about your ID, and how does that work?
Well, when I come home from work, there's at least 4 to 5 checkpoints I have to pass by.
At what time of the day is that?
That is at 12:30, 1 o'clock in the morning. So we'd have a few police officers, you know. So when you're coming down from Damascus Gate, you have a bunch of them sitting on top of Damascus Gate. You go down a little bit, you find another 2. Go down a little bit, you find 4. You go down a little bit, you find 6. But those are the final 6 that you have to pass by. And every 6 months we have new soldiers. So every 6 months they want to stop you, give me your ID, where are you from? And they speak to you as if in a tone that is like, I don't know who the hell are you, and I am bigger than you, I am the law, I am this. You do as I say, and only as I say. And this does not work here. I'm sorry, but like if you have any soldiers listening on your podcast, this does not work here. Because every time something like this happens, we tell them, like, you want to come with us in a high tone, we will also come to you in a high tone. Because we've been living here for 22 years. You are not from here. So, yeah.
Yeah. Does it mean that in your community, I mean, in general, I know in the Palestinian community, there is a lot of young guys, especially guys who have experience of being harassed and also being arrested and brought into the police station. Do you feel that in your community that happens too?
Of course. Oh, my community, I think, is the most community that we have arrests and crashes and this, because our community, the African community, is the only community that doesn't have Israeli settlers in it. It's the only, let's say, neighborhood that has no Israeli settlers. And that's why the military, let's say, wants us to leave it, because we are the closest to Al-Aqsa Mosque. Like the door of Al-Aqsa is right there. So if Israeli settlers get one house, then that means it's endgame.
Wow. Did you ever notice any kind of attempts by settlers?
Oh, yes, of course. One time I was coming home at, like, I think it's 3:30 in the morning. I had a banquet somewhere, and I went into my neighborhood, and I found settlers looking at houses at 3 o'clock in the morning. And I was like, what are you doing here? They started talking and yapping. I'm like, if you don't leave here right now, I will shout and I will bring you 48 people to beat you up.
Wow. So they are looking if they find any houses that were maybe empty?
They were looking at one house, yes. They want to get their hand inside this neighborhood, but they don't know how, because all of the houses have been signed off to the Waqf, to the Islamic Waqf. So it's impossible to get their hands on it.
Wow. And the houses where you live, are they also owned by the Waqf?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Like, because back in the day, there was a lot of selling from Palestinian part to Israelis, like in Hat al-Saadiyya, let's say, or other parts of the old city. So all the elderly of the old city got together and decided to sign off all of the property to the Islamic Waqf in order to prevent any more property selling to Israeli settlers from there.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. So does it mean, just to go back to the housing situation, these houses, I mean, if they were a former prison, that means that they are probably small and you have quite generally big families. So how does that work?
Very interesting. That doesn't stop them from having big families. I mean, space is definitely not a concern for people in our community. I mean, they deal with it one way or another.
But it means that
it's very packed, the houses. Yeah. The housing is very packed. So you have, let's say, my cousins, they sleep they sleep. One guy takes the right side of the room, one guy takes the left side of the room, one guy takes the middle.
So is it like they have mattresses piled up along the wall during the day, and then in the night they just put mattresses and sleep all of them together? Or do they have actual beds and like space for themselves?
Well, nowadays they do have space for themselves, because we were able to arrange a small area for them, like a small house for them to actually live in, all the brothers and stuff. But back in the day, no, it was mattresses. They'd go mattresses. Wake up time is the same. Sleeping time is the same for everyone.
Yeah. Then you have to coordinate.
Yes.
But for example, if you would want to get married at some point, would you bring your wife to live in that community if she was not from there? Or would that be problematic for her? Because
it's not problematic for her. It's problematic for the man, actually, for us. Because there's no space now. Now the community is very overloaded with people. We cannot put another person in the community. There's no space to live. So if somebody, let's say from my generation, wants to get married, we cannot live in the old city. We'll still have the house in the old city, although, but we cannot live in the old city. Because there's just no space to live.
Yeah, and then you'd have to rent somewhere else, and that is very expensive.
It is.
So that's why you have to work every night.
Every night, yes, basically, in order to try and survive. Life is extremely expensive for, let's say, the average working person. Extremely challenging and difficult.
Yeah. It's more expensive here than to live in Europe.
It is. Yeah.
I was going to ask you more about the specific challenges that you have living in the old city and maybe being from that community. You said that you are being stopped on the way by these checkpoints. You have settlers trying to take over your houses. Is there other things that you want to mention or examples to give people an idea of these challenges?
So when I get stopped by the police, when I tell them, the first question is Me'efata, which means where are you from? I tell them from Bab al-Majlis. Now Bab al-Majlis, for them, it's like you ticked something in their head, like go search them, go intimidate them, go do this, do that, make sure that they don't leave happy.
Yeah.
Because this is the only word that every single time when we have new officers or new army personnel, I hear them talking around with, let's say, the commander, and the commander tells them, like, this is the community that you have to make sure to mess up as much as you can. Like, just while walking by. So yeah, we are a target in their eyes. But I'm happy that I am a target.
Yeah, you're smiling with it. Yeah.
I mean, it kind of gives my life, it's a sort of a spice to it, It's a challenge, and I like challenges, and I like putting my head in the head of a stupid soldier. Tell them, what do you want? Yes.
Is there kind of pride in it?
Absolutely. As a person who is not completely harmless, but no weapon, no nothing, who lives here, who's getting stopped by, let's say, 20 soldiers with AR-15s and gas and all this, and still not caring. I mean...
Yeah, it's interesting. It's kind of a confirmation that you belong here. The more you feel that they are trying to get rid of you, the more you know how much you are rooted here. The harder it is for them to
get you out of it.
Yeah, that's very interesting. The Afro-Palestinian community is kind of famous for being part of the Palestinian resistance, right?
I mean, not everybody from the community, but mostly, yes. Many people from the community have done some sort of activity with the Palestinian resistance. For example, Ali Jadda, who has been in prison for 17 years and later released with a prisoner exchange program. And we also have Fatma al-Birnawi, we have my father who was in jail for 5 years, you have my uncle who's been in and out of prison. And I think, yes, 98% of the community has been in prison at least once.
When you say that they are in prison, does that mean that they are charged with certain things, or is that mainly administrative detention where they never find out why they were arrested?
Yes. They have this and that. I have a cousin right now who's serving 8 years, and still they don't have a charge on him. 8 years. And he has nothing to do with the incident that happened. He's actually coming out in this summer. He finishes this summer his sentences.
How old is he?
My age.
He was arrested when he was a late teenager.
Yes.
Wow. In which prison is he?
Right now, I think he is in... I'm not sure.
They move them around a lot,
They do move them around a lot, yes. But he's in, I think...
So you haven't seen him all that time? You cannot visit him or something?
No. Visits are only restricted to family only.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you ever been arrested?
Me? No. But at one time I was almost taken. Because also something that I haven't done, obviously.
Yeah.
But yes, when let's say something happens in the old city, the police and army become like raging bulls.
Yeah.
They just become, you come. You don't want to come, we'll drag you.
Yeah. Is that a constant fear that you have, that maybe one night I will not come home and I will stay in the police station? And
No, not at all.
You don't think about that all the time?
No, not at all. Even if I go to prison, let's say for 20 years, I wouldn't care. I would take my time, go inside, read some books, develop my mindset a little bit, use my time correctly. It is what it is, right? I'm Palestinian. I live. This is how we live. So better make use of your time.
Yeah, that's interesting, because in the one hand you say that you don't think about it all the time, and on the other hand you are already so much prepared.
Yes, I mean,
for it.
I hope for the best, but prepare for the worst.
Yeah.
Always.
Yeah. And how is the level of education in your community? I mean, all children go to school here, but does everybody have the opportunity to continue studying?
No, not everybody. Like, think about I was lucky, let's say, to be able to study and continue my studies as well as abroad. But most people, yes, don't go past Tawjihi. Even there's, in some cases, people, I have a cousin who hasn't finished 6th grade.
Oh.
Who just decided to just go and work.
So is that a financial struggle that people have?
Yes. I mean, people in the community are very poor because the standard of living here is very expensive, and when they have a lot of kids and a lot of that, they start racking up debts and whatnot, and they start thinking of new ways how to make money. So that's why sometimes the kids go off they leave school, they start going off to work in order to help their parents with paying off their debt.
Wow.
And that's what happened with a lot of people who I know.
So if they'd had the opportunity, they'd all wanted to continue studying, but they can't because they have to help provide for the family.
Yes.
Yeah. I find that very hard to...
It is.
Yeah.
But you find them, they are as well happy now. They're doing all right. We are all doing okay.
Yeah.
Although that the world really doesn't care about anything that happens here.
Yeah.
But that's
changing.
That is changing.
Yeah.
With the
Did you see the Amnesty International report recently? They finally mentioned that Israel is an apartheid state.
I mean, slowly but surely, I'm sure we're going to get there, because it's actually written in the Quran that we will be free from these suckers. Excuse my French.
Yeah. Well, studying the history of this land and reading how many different rulers there have been.
Oh, yes. This land has been very eventful throughout the years.
Yeah.
But this land has never seen peace. Let's just put it that way. I mean, maybe it has, but for maybe very few period of time.
Yeah.
But in general, yes, everybody wants a piece of this land.
I think that the big difference between previous rulers and the current Israel is that Israel is really a colonial imperialist state. And for example, if you look back, Ottomans and the Mamluks, and before that the Ayyubids, and they came as rulers, but they sort of integrated into the land. There was intermarriages. They wanted taxes, they wanted the money, and they wanted you to kind of obey the rulers, but they were not trying to forcibly displace the people that were living here and replace them. They dealt with the population that was there. And this is a new situation where they are trying to really replace.
These people are trying to replace everything. History, people, the entire infrastructure, everything. They want it all to themselves.
Yeah.
And that's basically what's happening.
Yeah. I mean, you're 22. You still have a long life ahead of you.
I mean, I hope so.
Yeah. What's your dream? Like, if you had this sort of power where you can just like change things with the snap of your finger, what would Jerusalem look like?
Wow. How to Jerusalem? That's a very interesting question. I really don't know how to answer that question, because I've never seen it like other than having problems. But I would wish that it would be peaceful, at least for 1 week. Just to like walk in the street. My dream, actually, I'll tell you what my dream is. My dream is simple. My dream is waking up, getting out of bed, going to my street, and not seeing police. I think that would be like the happiest day of my life. Not because when I go out, I have police and army to my right and police and army to my left. So there's really nowhere to run. So yes, my dream is waking up one day and not seeing the police. Yeah. Simple as that.
Yeah. That's amazing. Once I said to myself, I wish I can wake up one morning and drive to Gaza, go and eat fish, swim on the beach, meet some people there, and drive back. It's just 1 hour from Jerusalem. And it's very normal things that would now seem impossible, but that if they were possible, they would make life so much nicer.
I would love to go, let's say, have lunch in Amman, then go have dinner in Cairo. I have a car, but I cannot go.
No.
It's too complicated with this so-called Israel around.
If you hear sometimes stories how they used to take the train,
yes,
Haifa, Akka, and go to Beirut and see some theater and eat something there.
Yes, absolutely.
Sleep one night, come back.
I love the stories of, let's say, the elderly generation because specifically of those types of things, of transportation back in the day. I used to go from one country to another, completely easy. Inshallah, one day these days will be back.
Yeah.
I hope to see them before I die, but...
Yeah, well, that's good. You're still young. Yes. Yeah, that's what Ali said. He said that he has a lot of faith in this new generation, he said.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Yeah, he said that this generation is going to make a change.
Yeah, because plainly this generation really does not see the Israelis, does not see, but doesn't really care about how much firepower, how scary they are, or what is the consequences of what are they going to do to them. They just want to show them that we as well can challenge you.
Yeah.
You know, so we find like little kids going to Damascus Gate, cussing out the army, then running away.
Yeah.
Or now in Ramadan, I don't know what will happen this Ramadan, but previous Ramadan, it was very eventful. I'm sure you recall there was a lot of clashes here and there in Damascus Gate and in Al-Aqsa Mosque, and then Gaza intruded and became a big mess. But it was a good one because we won the, let's say, news game over the world. We saw a lot of world solidarity with the Palestinian cause. So it was excellent, actually, in my point of view, although some of it cost a little bit of lives. But it gave a good, let's say, push point for the end result, I guess.
Yeah.
So, don't know what will happen this Ramadan, but inshallah it will be something better.
Yeah, inshallah. Yeah. Thank you very much for your time to talk a bit about the Afro-Palestinian community. I will post in the show notes of this podcast a couple of links where people can read a little bit more, and a video that I found on YouTube where you can see a little bit of photos and material about the community and where you live, so that people have also a visual idea about that. And my last question, if people came to visit Jerusalem in the future, because now the airport is open again, people start again to plan trips, and if they were so interested to meet people in your community or to know where you live, is there any initiative, are there any organizations or people they can contact who are tour guides that can provide them with a visit or some in-depth information?
Well, in that terms, no, but they can contact us, the community, if they are truly interested. We do have a website, afropalestinians.org. And yes, all our information is there about our history, about how to contact us, our email addresses, even our Instagram page, although we don't post that much on it these days.
Maybe you can revive that after this talk. Yeah, I'll post that link in the show notes. People can go there. Are there any organizations, especially in your community, that support the community?
Like, we support ourselves with ourselves. Like, the organization that we have is kind of from our own pocket. So we're trying to revive the old city and help out people in the old city with our hopes and dreams, I guess. But
there is something like, for example, for the children or the people in the community where they can meet and they have some sort of activities?
Yes. We have two separate buildings. Well, not building, like rooms, let's say. One section is, say, the place where there used to be executions. That's the offices. And then the other place where you get sentenced is the hall, which is capable of holding 350 personnel.
Oh, wow. That's where you do your weddings and your activities?
Weddings, not anymore.
Oh, no.
I mean, weddings now, because we have many more people that we began to know, and it's a very diverse community now. So we do weddings outside the old city in general, and the old city weddings don't really work.
No.
No, not at all.
Nowhere to park your car to come anywhere close.
Yes.
That's true. Yeah. Now, thank you again. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to Stories from Palestine. If you enjoy the podcast, then here are several things you can do to support the show. Tell your friends about the podcast. Share some of the social media posts on Instagram or Facebook. Start following the YouTube channel. You can also hear the podcast audio there. And soon I will start uploading videos. Sign up for the email list so that you get a reminder with a clickable link to the new podcast episode. And in the future, you will be updated about programs and trips that I will start to organize. And of course, you can donate to help me pay for hosting the podcast and the website and all the related recording costs. It's the only source of income I have at the moment, so you can imagine how much I appreciate every cup of coffee or falafel sandwich that you buy me on the Ko-fi platform. All the links that you need can be found in the show notes and on the website storiesfrompalestine.info. That's it. I hope you will tune in again next week. If you enjoy listening to Stories from Palestine podcast, then I think you will also enjoy listening to my favorite podcast, which is called Jerusalem Unplugged. You can find it on most podcast players and on social media at Jerusalem Unplugged.